I told myself it was an upgrade. More pay, steady nights. No more drunks leaning over sticky bar tops to blow cheap beer in my face for a 50-cent tip. Just me and endless aisles of boxed furniture, cold concrete floors under bad lights, stale coffee that tastes like burned cardboard. I clocked in just before dusk, the sun dragging its last light behind the big blue IKEA sign that always seemed too cheerful for how dead it felt inside. I'd parked my car under a busted streetlight, slammed the door, and reminded myself I'd made the right choice. No more bar fights at closing time, just shelves and pallets. Easy. The floor supervisor, a man who didn't bother with hellos, shoved a neon vest at me. It smelled like sweat and that weird break room coffee I'd already tasted. He handed me a dented name tag stamped crooked with my name. Mara, all caps, scratched at the corners. Then came the laminated sheet. The plastic felt sticky, like 1,000 hands had sweated on it before mine. I read the bold heading first. Night shift employee rules, mandatory compliance. Before I could get past the title, someone spoke behind me. Don't bother reading all that crap. Riley leaned against the break room wall like she owned it already. She looked about my age, maybe younger. Buzzed hair on one side, dark hair falling over one eyebrow on the other. She had restless hands, kept flipping her own laminated sheet between her fingers like she might flick it into the trash any second. She squinted at me through the hair. Want to hear the good stuff? I shrugged. Sure. She cleared her throat like she was reading a bedtime story nobody wanted. Rule 1. Never speak to another employee between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Rule 2. Always follow the warehouse arrows, even if they change direction. Rule 3. If you hear knocking from inside a sealed box, open it immediately and look inside. Rule 4. Take your mandatory break at exactly 3:15 a.m., no more than 10 minutes. Rule 5. If the manager calls your name from the far aisle, answer immediately and approach him. Rule 6. Never leave your assigned section before your shift ends. Rule 7. Do not look directly at your reflection in the break room window. She let the sheet flap back against her vest and barked a laugh that didn't sound happy at all. Real welcoming, huh? Before I could think of something smart to say, he appeared. Mr. D. Darnell on the schedule, but everyone just called him that single letter, like the rest of his name rotted off somewhere back by the loading dock. Under the flickering fluorescence, his skin looked like old candle wax left too close to a heater. He smelled faintly of something damp, like wet laundry that never got dry. He held out 2 pieces of paper with something scribbled on them. You girls remember the rules. His voice scratched at my ears, dry, thin, like old paper sliding across a blade. Breaking them is messy. He didn't blink, he didn't smile. He just stood there until Riley snatched her paper out of his hand. I took mine slower, careful not to touch his fingers. Riley winked at me as she lowered her gaze to our assigned jobs. Messy, she mouthed. Then she crumpled her laminated sheet with rules like she might chuck it, but she stuffed it into her back pocket instead. I folded mine once, twice, jammed it deep in my vest pocket. The rules pressed tight against my ribs like a warning I wasn't ready to hear. It was an upgrade, I kept telling myself as I followed Riley past rows of flat-packed tables stacked higher than my head. Just keep your head down, follow the rules. Punch in, punch out, go home in one piece. Easy money, that's what I told myself. By midnight, the warehouse felt like it had swallowed me whole. It was so big at night, bigger than it ever looked when I'd come here in daylight to grab a cheap bookshelf or mugs that chipped after one wash. At night, the aisles stretched forever. Towers of flat-pack boxes loomed over me like cliffs, their shadows spilling across the polished concrete in long, crooked shapes. I pushed a squeaky cart piled with clearance lamps that nobody wanted. I'd been stacking them under the flickering row of lights in the home lighting section. The floor lamps were dusty, cheap metal with wonky shades. Each one rattled in its box when I shifted them around to kill time. The hum of the overhead lights was constant, but every now and then, one would flicker, buzz louder, then go dead for a heartbeat, before flaring back to life. It made the shadows dance. I tried not to look too hard down the side aisles. Sometimes I thought I saw legs behind a stack of headboards. Once, I could have sworn I caught someone crouched low behind a pile of throw pillows, their shape vanishing when I took a step closer. I told myself it was Riley, messing with me. She had that grin when she first read the rules, like she wanted them to be fake, just so she could break them. I hadn't seen her since we split up to our assigned sections, as Mr. D called them. Mine was home lighting and a chunk of rugs and lamps nobody ever bought. Hers was somewhere back near bedroom sets and kids' furniture. I thought about those rules more than I wanted to. Rule 1 was easy for now. No one to talk to, not yet anyway. Rule 2 sat heavier in my head. I'd seen those arrows painted on the floor during training, bright yellow lines pointing you through the maze of aisles. I'd thought they were for customers who couldn't follow the showroom map. But here on night shift, you weren't supposed to question them at all. If an arrow pointed left, you went left. Even if it hadn't been there a second ago. Even if it led somewhere that didn't make sense. My laminated sheet pressed against my chest inside my vest. I kept touching it through the fabric, like it might fall out if I didn't. Somewhere near aisle 12, I heard it, a faint knocking sound. I stopped pushing my cart and held my breath. It was far away, maybe behind a stack of heavy boxes. I leaned closer, but the hum of the lights swallowed it up. I told myself it was the building settling, or maybe one of the old forklifts shuttering where they parked them by the back loading dock. I pushed the cart again, wheels squealing under the weight. The big clock over the forklift dock glowed red in the distance. 12:42 a.m. Still early. 2 hours to go before Rule 1 even mattered. I tried to keep my mind on the hours left instead of the shadows, instead of the shape I kept seeing every time a light flickered off and back on. I wiped dust off a lamp box with my sleeve and felt the stale air settle cold in my lungs. No more drunks. No more spilled beer. Just me in a warehouse so big I couldn't hear my own footsteps after a while. This was better, I kept telling myself. An upgrade. Keep your head down. Stack the lamps. Somewhere deep in the warehouse, I thought I heard a laugh. Quick and sharp, like Riley's. But when I turned to check, all I saw were the shelves breathing their stale air back at me. I told myself it was nothing and kept stacking lamps, counting minutes until the rules would matter more than I wanted them to. The big red numbers on the forklift dock clock glowed at me like an accusation. 1:58 a.m. 2 minutes. 2 minutes until Rule 1 meant more than cheap ink on laminated plastic. I wiped my palms on my vest, even though they'd already left sweaty smudges on the dusty lamp boxes. I was crouched by the end cap where the clearance floor lamps went, the kind with the wobbly shades and missing screws. My knees ached against the cold concrete, but I kept fussing with the stack because it gave my hands something to do while the minutes ticked by. Somewhere behind the racks, a box thudded onto the floor. I jumped, knocking over one of the lamps. The metal pole clanged against the pallet and rolled under the lowest shelf, out of reach. I sighed, too tired to crawl after it. Mara! I flinched at the sound of my name. Riley's voice. I turned so fast my knee cracked against the edge of a crate. She stepped out from the shadows between 2 rows of pendant lights, her neon vest crooked, laminated sheet poking out of her back pocket. She had that grin again, the one that said she'd never follow rules just because they were rules. Her breath puffed out in a tiny cloud when she spoke. The warehouse was always freezing at night, but seeing my breath made it feel worse. "You got a smoke?" she asked, leaning one shoulder against a tower of desk lamp boxes, like she was back behind a bar waiting for last call. I opened my mouth to say something. Just a dumb joke about how I quit smoking last year. But the clock behind her shoulder flicked over. 2 a.m. The red numbers glowed in my brain like they'd been branded there. Rule 1. Never speak to another employee between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. My throat locked tight around any word I might have said. Riley squinted at me, waiting, then rolled her eyes when nothing came out. "Oh, come on," she said, dragging the laminated sheet from her pocket and flapping it at me like a flag. "You really buy this? Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, it's all scare tactics, just so we don't unionize or whatever." She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tired purple smudges under her eyes. She smelled faintly of cheap soap and stale break room coffee. "Mara." She poked my shoulder with 2 fingers. "Seriously, just say something, anything." I forced my lips to move, but nothing came out. Her finger jabbed again. My mind buzzed with all the ways to break it, just to prove her right, just to shake off the feeling that the air itself had thickened. Then something shifted at the far end of the aisle. A shape hunched low behind the fake showroom divider. A figure dragging one foot behind the other, the rubber soles squeaking faintly on the polished floor. Mr. D. At least I thought it was him at first. The same stoop to the shoulders, same droop to the head. But when his face twitched under the overhead light, my chest locked up. The skin around his mouth sagged like wet cloth. The shape of his head didn't look right. Too long, too narrow at the chin. Riley turned, followed my stare. Her grin faltered when she saw it too. The figure's head jerked sideways, too fast, like a bird pecking at crumbs. I saw its mouth widen in a single smooth stretch, splitting open down the chin into a slit that kept spreading until it was just a tunnel of wet darkness where teeth should have been. Riley hissed through her teeth. "Fuck these stupid rules. Just say something, Mara. Come on, talk." My lips trembled. My throat burned. The rules pressed hard against my ribs through my vest. I made myself whisper, "Go back, Riley." The figure snapped its head up, like it heard me from across the aisle, except now it wasn't Mr. D's face anymore. The skin hung loose off the bones, slick and gray under the flickering lights. The slit mouth widened like it wanted to swallow every word I'd just broken loose. Riley's eyes went wide. She grabbed my hand without asking, cold fingers squeezing mine so tight my knuckles popped. We bolted. I didn't even think about the half-stacked lamps or the broken Rule 1 humming in my ears like a threat. We ran until the humming lights above us blurred into one long, flickering hallway that felt like it would never end. Riley's hand was still locked around mine as we sprinted through aisles of cheap floor lamps and fake ferns. My breath scraped my throat raw, cold air cutting deep every time I forced it back out. Behind us, the dragging sound scraped along the polished concrete. One foot sliding, something wet slapping against the ground like a mop dripping old water. We didn't talk. We couldn't. The words stuck in my chest like barbed wire, maybe because the rule was broken once already, and the warehouse wanted more. We skidded around a corner stacked with boxes of mismatched rugs and nearly slammed into an intersection. 4 aisles crossing like a tiny city grid, floor so clean it reflected the flickering overhead lights. And there they were. The arrows. Bright yellow lines, thick as my wrist, painted onto the concrete. The old ones were chipped and faded under my boots, pointing straight ahead, back toward the section I was supposed to stay in. But there was a new one now. Still so fresh, the edges glistened like wet paint. It curved left, down an aisle that didn't look like it belonged to anything but darkness, and a line of plastic-wrapped bedroom sets rattling softly in the draft. I stared at it, trying not to breathe too loud. The new arrow twitched when I looked right at it, like the paint had a heartbeat of its own. Rule 2. Always follow the warehouse arrows, even if they change direction. Riley leaned against the nearest stack of boxed dressers, gasping for breath. Her hair stuck to her cheek in sweaty strands. She glanced down at the arrow, and then at me, and for a second I thought maybe she'd turn and follow it like we were supposed to. Instead, she spat, just a wet smack on the bright yellow paint. The spit smeared across the arrow's tip and dripped into the tiny grooves in the concrete. "Let's break another," she said, voice cracked but steady. She grabbed my vest and tugged me the opposite way, away from the fresh line of paint. We stumbled down the dark aisle lined with shrink-wrapped bedroom sets. The plastic crackled like dry leaves brushing against each other. Some of the boxes bulged at the corners, like whatever was inside had shifted in the dark and pressed against the cardboard. Riley kept pulling me until her limp slowed us down. Her boot scraped the floor wrong, like she'd twisted her ankle somewhere between running and spitting on the arrow. But she didn't say a word about it, just gritted her teeth and kept moving. Behind us, the dragging footstep sound faded, replaced by a different noise. Something softer. A wet slither, too slow to be a person, too smooth to be anything that should be in a furniture store. Every so often I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting Mr. D's stretched face to peel out of the shadows. But it was worse, not seeing anything at all. Just the echo of something brushing the floor and the faint rattling of the plastic sheeting wrapped tight around beds nobody wanted to sleep in. I felt the laminated rules digging into my ribs with every step. I wanted to tear them out, leave them on the concrete, and run until dawn. But Riley's hand kept dragging me forward, past signs that said sale and new lower price. Past rows of sagging mattresses that smelled like stale foam and cleaning chemicals that didn't work anymore. We didn't follow the arrows. We didn't look back long enough to see if they twisted behind us again. We just moved, hoping the slithering thing behind the stacks wouldn't care enough to follow us deeper into the parts of the store that felt wrong even in daylight. For a second, I thought maybe we'd left it behind, until I heard the softest scrape, just a whisper against the polished concrete, matching our steps for every breath we dared to take. The aisle seemed to get narrower the deeper we went, boxed bedroom sets pressing closer together, shrink wrap crinkling like brittle leaves every time my shoulder brushed against the stacked cardboard. The smell back here turned stale. Old wood glue, foam that had never fully dried, maybe mildew hiding under the pallets. Riley's limp had gotten worse. Every few steps she hissed through her teeth, but she kept her hand curled in the back of my vest so I couldn't get ahead of her. I wanted to stop, tell her to rest her ankle, but the dragging scrapes somewhere behind us pushed us on. We turned past a row of boxed bed frames when the sound changed. 3 knocks, deep, heavy, muffled. I stopped so fast that Riley nearly crashed into my back. The knocks came again, slower this time, like whatever was inside the box needed time to wind up. I scanned the stacks until I spotted it. A big rectangular box wedged crooked on a wooden pallet. The shrink wrap around it stretched thin in places, tape puckered at the corners like it was holding its breath. The knocking made the whole box jump a little, just an inch each time, like it wanted to walk right off the pallet and come find us. Riley leaned her weight on her good foot, staring at the box like she expected it to say her name next. She pulled her box cutter out of her vest pocket, flicked the blade out with her thumb. Rule 3. If you hear knocking from inside a sealed box, open it immediately and look inside. I could feel the laminated sheet in my pocket digging into my ribs again, heavier now than it had ever felt. Riley's grin came back, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. "Ready to break it?" she asked, voice low like we were kids whispering under blankets. I didn't trust my throat. I just nodded. She pressed the blade tip into the edge of the tape, slow at first, the metal slicing through plastic that squeaked under her grip. The box shivered with every knock, a tiny puff of stale air leaking out when the tape split. Then she stopped. Her shoulders tensed like she might follow through and peel the whole side open, let whatever was inside crawl out and look us in the eye. But she didn't. She pushed the blade in deeper instead, sideways this time, into the thick cardboard, into whatever thumped behind it. I heard it before I saw it. The wet pop, the sudden sigh that didn't sound like air escaping plastic. It sounded softer, like a child letting out its last breath into a pillow. Dark liquid dribbled out of the slit in the box, thick and sticky, sliding down the cardboard in lazy streaks that smelled like old pennies and rotten meat left too long in a fridge that didn't work anymore. Riley pulled the blade out fast, her knuckles white around the handle. The thing inside the box gave one last shudder, a soft scraping like something small trying to turn over. Then nothing. She wiped the blade on her vest, smearing a dark line across the bright neon fabric. Her shoulders shook as she breathed out a ragged laugh that sounded more like a cough. "It's just a fucking trick," she said. "That's all this is. Just a trick to scare us straight." My eyes were stuck on the tiny river of dark liquid dripping off the pallet onto the smooth concrete floor. It pooled under my boot, warm enough to steam in the cold aisle air. Somewhere behind us, something brushed against the plastic-wrapped mattresses. A soft shift, a reminder that we hadn't run far enough yet. Riley wiped her free hand across her mouth, smearing a line of grime across her cheek. She gave the box a quick kick with her good foot. It rocked, but it didn't knock back this time. "Come on," she said, voice flat and hollow. She slipped the box cutter back into her pocket, took my hand again, and pulled me past the dripping cardboard, deeper into the maze of boxes that felt smaller every time we tried to escape them. We didn't speak after the box. There wasn't much left to say anyway. Riley's hand felt colder than before, her grip softer, like she was saving her strength for something worse. We shuffled back through the aisles that looked like they were rearranging themselves every time we turned a corner. No matter which way we moved, it felt like the warehouse pressed closer. Shelves leaning in, lights humming louder overhead, concrete floors that didn't echo right anymore. By the time we stumbled into the break room, the wall clock over the microwave read 3:14 a.m. My whole body buzzed with leftover adrenaline that had nowhere to go. Riley limped ahead of me, pushing open the door so hard it banged the wall behind it. The stale smell hit me first. Burned coffee, sweat, microwaved noodles, and something faintly sour under the fake lemon disinfectant. The fluorescent bulb in the ceiling fixture flickered, washing everything in sickly blue-white light. A dented vending machine hummed in the corner, its glass front streaked with fingerprints and half-empty rows of dusty snacks. The table in the center was covered in old paper cups, brown coffee rings, and a single cracked chair that looked ready to give up if you breathed too close to it. Take your mandatory break at exactly 3:15 a.m. No more than 10 minutes. Riley collapsed cross-legged on the grimy floor instead of the chair. She tugged at her bootlaces but didn't bother taking her shoe off. The ankle under her pant leg was already purple, swelling like bread dough left out too long. She didn't flinch when she pressed her thumb into the bruise. I leaned my back against the wall near the door, fighting the urge to peek through the wire mesh window. The hum outside felt thicker here, closer, like the warehouse was pressed up against the break room walls, listening for us to mess up again. Riley pulled herself up just enough to grab the vending machine by its side. She rocked it once, twice, then dragged it across the dirty linoleum until it slammed up against the break room door. The heavy clunk rattled down the thin walls. She leaned her sweaty forehead against the humming metal, eyes half shut, breath coming out in broken puffs. "Watch this," she said, voice so calm it made my neck prickle. She glanced at the clock, 3:16 a.m., then 3:17 a.m. I stayed silent, my back pressed flat to the wall like maybe I could sink through it. Riley grinned at me, wide and cracked. 11 minutes, 12, 13. She counted each second under her breath like she was daring the rules to do something about it. From the hallway outside came a soft scratching. At first it sounded like a rat under the vending machine, but it got sharper, heavier, like nails dragging across the metal doorframe. Then came the dragging noise again, the same wet scrape we'd run from in the aisles. The break room door rattled once, just a tiny knock that made the vending machine creak forward an inch. I could see the frame quiver at the corners where old paint flaked off. Then came Mr. D's voice, too close, too calm, too dry to sound alive. "Mara, Riley, open up girls, break's over." His words slid through the thin door like cold water soaking into cheap cloth. I pressed my fist to my mouth so I wouldn't answer. Riley's grin didn't budge, but I saw her fingers tighten on the broken mop handle she'd dragged in with her. She jammed it under the door handle, bracing the latch against the vending machine. "Not tonight," she whispered to the door. The scratching turned to pounding, once, twice, 3 times. The door banged so hard the frame cracked at the top corner. Dust sifted down from the drop ceiling, landing in Riley's hair and across her shoulders. She didn't flinch. I heard her breath, steady and sharp, louder than the vending machine hum. We held still until the pounding stopped, until the scratching faded down the hall. The only thing left was the hum, the stale break room light, and the tiny groan of the cracked frame settling around us. Riley jerked her chin toward the tiny square window above the mop sink. "Out," she breathed. I slipped through first, metal frame scraping my back. Riley squeezed through after me, dragging her bad foot over the sill. I grabbed her elbow to keep her upright when she hit the concrete outside. The hum behind the break room door felt heavier now, pressed up against the glass like a breath I couldn't see. I didn't mean to look, but I did. The window's reflection caught me before I could duck away. Rule 7. Do not look directly at your reflection in the break room window. My face looked back, same matted hair, same sweat-slick skin, but the eyes were gone. Just 2 hollow pits leaking something thick and gray, like wet pulp dripping down my cheeks. I blinked once, and the image flickered. My face looked normal again, eyes right where they belonged, wide and terrified. But behind my eyes, deep under my skin, I felt the ache start, like something had burrowed there when I wasn't watching. Something that wanted to see what I'd break next. We left the break room behind us like it might bite if we looked back. Riley leaned heavy on my shoulder, her limp worse now that her ankle had turned from purple to something closer to black under the torn hem of her work pants. Every time she shifted her weight, I felt her breath catch against my arm. Sharp little gasps she pretended I couldn't hear. We pushed through a side hall lined with locked supply closets and old display shelves nobody used anymore. Somewhere overhead, the warehouse lights buzzed and flickered, humming like they were whispering to each other about where we were. We just rounded a corner by the discount patio sets when the overhead speaker crackled to life. A burst of static that crawled across my scalp like cold fingers. "Mara, please come to aisle 17. The voice was Mr. D's, but not quite. It sounded too clean, too clear, like it had been dragged through an old cassette tape. Warped just enough to make every syllable bend. Rule 5. If the manager calls your name from the far aisle, answer immediately and approach him. I stopped walking without meaning to. Riley's arm slid off my shoulder and she nearly dropped her weight straight onto her bad foot. She caught herself on the edge of an empty shopping cart, rattling the whole metal frame. Mara. Her voice was all grit now, no grin left at the edges. Don't you fucking dare. The speaker crackled again, closer this time, like the voice had crawled out of the PA and into the walls around us. Mara, we're short-staffed tonight. Come here. It stretched my name out too long. The second half warbled and echoed until I felt it burrow under my skin. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice felt closer than my own breath. Riley grabbed the shopping cart and shoved it sideways, knocking over a tower of flat-pack patio chairs. The metal frames clattered to the concrete like a box of dropped silverware. Don't listen to him, she hissed. She grabbed my wrist so tight it made my fingers tingle. You stay right here with me. The voice oozed out of the overhead speaker again, warped deeper now. Mara, aisle 17. Don't make me come find you. I felt my feet twitch forward like they'd move on their own if Riley didn't have her grip on me. She saw it too. The panic flashed across her eyes for half a second, before she bared her teeth and did something that rattled the whole aisle. She grabbed a metal shelf stacked with folding chairs and shoved it with her good shoulder. The entire unit tipped, wheels squealing on the polished floor. The crash when it hit the ground echoed so loud it stung my eardrums. Folding chairs scattered everywhere, clanging and bouncing off the concrete. On the other side of the mess, something shrieked, part animal, part child. The sound slipped under the metal frames, rising and falling like someone dragging their nails through a throat that didn't want to make human noises. Riley dragged me backward, away from the tangled heap of metal. Her breathing came in shallow rasps, every step making her limp worse. She didn't care. Neither did I. By the time the shriek faded, the overhead lights flickered again. New arrows, wet, fresh, too yellow against the gray concrete, snaked across the floor under the debris. They pointed deeper into the dark corners of the warehouse, places that didn't feel like they belonged to us anymore. I didn't need to look at my laminated sheet to know what Rule 6 said. I could feel it pressed to my ribs like a cold stone. Rule 6. Never leave your assigned section before your shift ends. Riley saw it too. Her grin didn't come back this time. Just a tight line across her face, teeth flecked pink from where she'd bitten her tongue when the shelf fell. She squeezed my hand so hard her knuckles turned bone white. We're not staying in our section, she rasped. Fuck that. We stepped over the arrows that shouldn't have been there. The shadows ahead felt softer than the light behind us. Softer, but hungry. And I followed Riley into them anyway, because the voice behind me was still saying my name, and I'd rather break every rule than answer it again. The condemned showroom smelled wrong the second we crossed the yellow tape line. Damp carpet, stale glue, mildew thick enough to make my teeth ache when I breathed through my mouth. The old display couches were split at the seams, cheap stuffing hanging out in gray lumps that looked like rotting insulation. The fake wood floors had buckled in places, puddles of sticky water pooling in the dips. I kept one hand tight around Riley's wrist so she wouldn't drop all her weight on her ruined ankle. She didn't complain. Her breathing sounded rough, Too wet. She left dark smudges on every old display cabinet she leaned on. Somewhere past the broken dining sets and plastic-wrapped mattresses, I heard the wet shuffle before I saw him. Mr. D, or what was left of him, waited at the far end of the old showroom, half in shadow. The skin down his chest split open like someone had unzipped him from throat to belly. Inside, the slick gray shapes moved against each other. Hands, too many hands, knuckles bent the wrong way, fingers twitching like they were still learning what they were for. His ribs creaked with every step forward. Each breath made his split chest peel wider. His face drooped where the old skin clung to the bone. One side tore down the middle when he tried to grin. No teeth, just a wet slit that flexed when he talked. "You broke every rule," he croaked, voice doubled like two old tape recordings playing on top of each other. "You ruined my harvest." Riley didn't wait. She pulled her box cutter from her vest pocket and flung it across the open floor. It hit his cheek with a soft thunk, the blade disappearing into the sagging skin. He didn't flinch. The loose flap of his face twitched like it was about to smile again. A small shape pressed forward under the open skin on his chest. A child's face, soft and unfinished, eyes half-formed, mouth opening and closing, like it was trying to speak through layers of wet muscle. It wept soundlessly while Mr. D's voice scraped out above it. Riley pushed me back so hard I nearly tripped over a ripped armchair. She limped forward, teeth bared, eyes wild, even as blood dripped from where she'd split her lower lip on her own teeth. "Run, Mara," she said. Her voice was calm, like she was telling me my break was over. Mr. D lunged, a sound like wet rags tearing apart. I heard Riley's bones snap before I saw her drop under him, the weight of all those gray hands pressing her flat into the rotten carpet. Her shout was cut off too fast. I didn't look back. I ran. I dodged broken coffee tables and mannequins missing their heads, boxes that knocked over when my shoulder hit them, spilling cheap bedding across the cracked floor. Behind me, the arrows twisted under my boots, fresh yellow lines that smeared and slid like living worms. They pointed in every direction, flipping whenever my foot hit them, trying to turn me around, trying to lead me back. I didn't stop. I slammed my hip into the old fire door. The metal screamed on its hinges. Cold night air slapped my face raw, and I stumbled out onto the icy gravel behind the store. The sky was red at the edges, dawn trying to bleed through thick clouds. My breath burned deep in my ribs. It felt like I'd left pieces of myself back inside, buried under the showroom floor with Riley's last sound still echoing off those damp display walls. I didn't clock out. I didn't leave a note. I just dropped my dented name tag on the cracked sidewalk by the back exit and walked away while the sky peeled itself open behind me. I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd come home, wash the warehouse stink out of my hair, sit on my kitchen floor until the sun burned it all away. But tonight, crouched on the cold linoleum with my laptop in my lap, I hear it again, a soft scrape in the hallway outside my apartment door. My TV screen is black, but I see it anyway. My reflection flickers back at me with eyes that aren't mine. Then I hear it, Mr. D's voice, Riley's voice, my own voice, all at once, whispering through the TV's blank glass. "Mara, you forgot a rule."